Kia ora, everyone. Waiting rooms admitting everyone at the moment.
Oh, I was on mute. Kia ora, everyone.
Kia ora.
Oh, kia ora.
Awesome. We'll wait a few moments to see if a few more people join before getting started.
Oh, kia ora, Kat.
Oh, tēnā koe koroa. Good to see you. Kia ora koutou.
Oh, awesome to see some people coming in. Kia ora, everyone. Awesome. Well, we might get started. A few people might trickle in as we go, and that's all right. So I'll start us off with a karakia, and then I'll give us a bit of structure for today. So, e te atua whakatata mai kia mātou I tēnei rā. Arahia mātou e o mātou mahi, kia marama, kia tika, mō te puanga o te katoa. Āmine. So kia ora, ko Lily taku ingoa. My name is Lily, and I'm in the grants team here at Trust Waikato. I see a few familiar faces here, and I see some faces that I haven't seen before. So hello, it's great to see you all. Thank you for joining us today. So our hui will be, our purpose of our hui will be outlined by Danielle, who is here with us and is our communications manager here at Trust Waikato. She'll outline the structure of how it will go, our sustainability commitment and our climate change framework that we have. Then we will hear from Rachel, who is from the Waikato District Council, and she is a senior advisor on climate action there. She'll give us an introduction to climate change and carbon emissions. We'll then hear from Joe, who is from Go Eco and works across 4 strategic frameworks there. And Joe will go over our climate response program and some workshop details that we have coming up. Lastly, we'll hear from Simon, who is from Toitu. He's the product manager there. Toitu is a tool that you can use to measure carbon emissions, specifically for SMEs. And then at the end, we will have Q&A facilitated by Danielle. So we've held this as a meeting rather than a seminar, so that at the end, if you feel comfortable, just voice any questions you may have. If not, feel free to pop some questions in the chat function. You can pop them in as we go or at the end, and we'll answer all those questions at the end. So that's enough from me. I will now pass it on to Danielle.
Thanks, Lily, and welcome everyone. Just a FYI, Lily, I've just made you the host as some people are still coming in and need admitting. So I didn't want to get too distracted looking at who was coming in while I was chatting. So welcome everyone. Thank you for making the time to come together today around climate emissions and how that pertains to our organizations. So I will share where Trust Waikato is in terms of our thinking about carbon emissions and climate change. As an organization, we have done a significant amount of work to understand our own emissions and how they contribute in terms of our operational work, our investment portfolio, and our grant making. So I'm just going to share my screen a moment. Oh, sorry, Lily, it's not letting me. It says my host has disabled, so I might see if you can. You are the host now. Okay, cool. Sorry about that, team. Alrighty, can we see my slideshow?
Yeah, we can see that.
Great. So just based on that, we had announced our meat behind this, the heart of it, is that the effects of climate change are not going to be felt equally amongst our community, and that we really need to mitigate the inequality of these impacts, as stated in the end of paragraph 2. With that is really that a just transition is really important to how we view climate change and what we're going to do to mitigate it. So that's just a bit about our one there, and just bear with me. With that, before we get to the point of having to reach a just transition, and while we get to that point, we really need to make sure that our own house is in order. And we've done some work on that based on this framework, which I can pop up on the side here. Can we see that okay here? Do you see this? Thumbs up, anyone? Cool, awesome. So with that, it really starts with our commitment, being the one that I just shared earlier, but also others, including the commitment that we signed with other community trusts around the country around a funder's commitment to climate change, and that has 7 points that we're aiming to meet with our funding commitment. And we've also registered for our a commitment for our investment portfolio to meet net zero by 2050, if not sooner. We'd like it to be much sooner. However, there's some technical and technological issues around that. From an operational point of view, we understand that emissions and what we produce here in our business, COVID has impacted that over the last few years, just with people working from home and not being meeting kanohi ki kanohi as much, but we hope that in the next couple of years we'll be able to track a more accurate perspective of that, and it might be that that increases as well, but we are keeping an eye on that. We treat our investment and our grant making emissions as scope 3. So our investment portfolio has some exclusions around fossil fuels and other things that we don't like. However, we need to be careful that we don't just sell out of any high emitting carbon producing investments, just with the mindset that if we do that, then they may end up in the private market, and there they won't change or have, I guess, the other people's perspectives reaching them and pushing them to do better, and therefore they may not change. And so engagement with those investments is really high on our priority list. But today it's our grant making that we're here to discuss. And we understand that by granting to our community, there's emissions that should be attributable to Trust Waikato in terms of the work that you and your organizations are doing, and the emissions that you produce. So we are wanting to understand and take action against that. And fundamentally, we think that we should play a role in emissions and reductions and offsetting those if need be, based on the work that you are completing with our funding in mind. So simplistically, what we're saying here is that if an organization's revenue is $10,000 and we grant $1,000 to that organization, then 10% of their emissions should be attributable to Trust Waikato. While that can be quite a blunt measure, it's one that we think is in the ballpark and what we should be looking at. We believe there's an opportunity here very strongly for a collaborative approach and a reduction plan, and that collective action makes a lot more sense than each of us trying to do work in this space individually and in our own silos. So with that in mind, cue Simon, we ran a pilot with Toitu and 17 of our organizations, and they participated by using the tool to assess their own emissions, and all of that information was shared back with us. We then could assess that data and make our own judgment calls in terms of the percentage of revenue and the funding that we had provided to those organizations, what should be attributable to us. What this really pointed out to us at Trust Waikato is that there's a massive opportunity to do a lot around a collective approach to reduction, and that's something that we're really interested in doing. Finally, we do understand that there's definitely need for support around this as well. We're not expecting organizations to muddle through what can be a really complex area. And whilst it starts out potentially being quite complex, there really is just the need to do something. That might not be perfect first time, and we don't expect it to be, including what we're doing ourselves. We just want to really keep trying to do the very best, reassess, come back to it, and we believe that if we have that mindset and we are iterative and take that improvement approach collectively, then we should be doing something meaningful together. And with that, I will stop sharing my screen and see if I can make Rachel host, as she will be up next. So just bear with me. And kia ora, Rachel, welcome.
Kia ora. Sorry for lateness. I had tech issues, the joys of technology these
Oh, it
days.
never gets old. But okay, you came in for perfect timing, so that's absolutely fine. I will just see if I can make you a host, Rachel. And that should mean that you can share your screen okay. There we go.
Okay, let's see if this works. Sorry, I'm just trying to, here we go. Excellent. Is that visible for you? Great. Excellent. Okay. So, kia ora tātou. My name is Rachel Goddard. I'm the Senior Advisor for Climate Action at Waikato District Council. Before that, I was at the University of Waikato for nearly 10 years as Head of Sustainability. So I'm going to give you the fastest overview ever of climate change. I'm going to take 30 years worth of knowledge and cram it down into a few slides, sort of to upskill you and raise awareness about climate change and maybe dispel some of the myths and explain the science. I kind of feel like I'm good cop, bad cop here, because I'm going to give you all the doom and gloom, and Joe's going to give you the solutions, I hope, and Simon as well. So, so here we go. I'm going to race into it. So climate change, I'm sure you've all heard, it's in the media every day. It's more prevalent. There's more storms, more flooding, more drought. And for me in my role, I see this every day, and it's getting worse. There's more and more in the media, and it's getting to the stage now where, you know, the scientists at the IPCC and governments are actually saying this is getting a little bit alarming. People were actually going beyond the safe levels, the thresholds, and we will breach them, you know, shortly. So I guess for me, there's a sense of urgency in this, but I'm trying to balance it with not being too alarmist, you know, because if we give up hope, we won't take action, and that's exactly what we don't want. So what is climate change? It's essentially, it's us with our activities creating greenhouse gases, which are going up into the atmosphere and trapping the sun's heat. And obviously we can see the effects of that right across the globe. I know in the UK, my partner was there a few weeks ago, and it was almost 40 degrees. It was the hottest it had ever been on record. And we're seeing that in many countries, Pakistan, Spain, America. It just goes on and on and on. And we can track it over time and see, yep, it's actually getting worse. And unfortunately, it's us that's created it with our lifestyles and our cars and our consumption, and you know, we all want to have a comfortable life, and it's trying to make that the assessment of whether, you know, living like this is causing the impacts that we have, and how we reassess perhaps how we live. So in terms of the process, and if we look over time, we can actually go back about 800,000 years and look at isotopes or like air bubbles and ice cores, and we can look at tree rings, we look at soil, we can look at rocks, and we can understand over time what the CO2 was like many years ago and what it's like now, and we can track it and we can graph it. And scientists are saying that the CO2 right now, the process, it's about 300 times faster than all of the natural processes over the last 10,000 years. And we know since the Industrial Revolution that our CO2 has increased about 50%. So it's absolutely massive. It's gone pretty steady over the time. It's shot up since the Industrial Revolution. And there's a lovely little graph that I've stolen, and that gives you the sense. So, you know, people often say, oh, but isn't it a natural process? Doesn't it go up and down over time? Well, that's a very, very long time scale. And you can see on the right-hand side, it's just shooting straight up. And that's really only in the last like 100 years. And we know this is happening. And yep, it's pretty concerning. That safe level is about 350 parts per million. We're now at 417 parts per million of CO2 in the atmosphere. That's how it's measured. So it's getting a bit concerning. You know, we are highly likely to lose our coral reefs, which is pretty tragic. And there are other impacts as well, which I'll touch on very briefly shortly. So I found this fascinating. I was doing a little bit of research thinking, gosh, you know, when was CO2 last this high? And it was over 4 million years ago, and that's what we look like. And I was like, that is extraordinary. You know, we were barely human. I think it was like 4.1 million years ago, and that's how high the CO2 was then. It was incredibly high, like it is now, and it was 4 degrees warmer, and there were forests in the Arctic. And the sea levels were 5 to 25 meters higher, which if that was happening right now, which we're heading that way, we'd be wiping out most of the coastal areas and cities that are low lying. So I think it's a very interesting indication. And we were almost human, but not quite. Right. So limits, you've probably heard, you know, in the media and in reports, you know, 1.5 degrees, that's like the buzzword, 1.5 degrees. That's like the safe threshold. That's the level, the rise we should not go past. And right now we're probably tracking, we don't know, but we think we're tracking maybe 2.5 degrees. It doesn't sound a lot, you know. Some people go, oh, but won't it be nice, it'll be warmer. Like, well, actually it's going to be incredibly impactful. Even 0.5 degree will be an immense impact on not just society and health, but, you know, whole ecosystems, biodiversity, our economy, every single area will be impacted. And we're predicting that the safe 1.5 degrees will be breached in maybe 10 or 20 years. So we will be living in a different world. And I've actually started to say climate change and put a D on the end now, because we know, unfortunately, that it has, and we're passing the safe thresholds. So how hot? So by 2050, it could be 2.5 degrees warmer. We're trying to project because we don't know. It's all dependent on our behavior. If we change our systems and change our behavior, if we use science, we use technology, we have grassroots movements from community, from business, from every sector, everywhere, you know, things can change. But you've got to remember, once the gases are up in the atmosphere, they're going to stay there for hundreds of years. So whatever we do now, it's going to take a long time for it to have that effect. And like I said earlier, we know we can see the impacts of all the storms and droughts and wildfires, etc. So those impacts, I said earlier, they're quite varied. You know, the number of climate-related disasters has tripled in the last 30 years. It's quite extraordinary how rapidly. I don't think anyone had anticipated how fast this would happen. I think we all thought, oh, we have plenty of, time, we can carry on with our behavior, but it's happening way more rapidly than we had anticipated. And so between 2006 and 2016, the rate of global sea level rise was 2.5 times faster than it was for the entire 20th century. So if you could imagine a person standing near the water, we thought the water might be up to their calf, in a few years' time, 10, 20, 30 years' time. It's tracking much, much, much higher. So there was a report out recently that said sea level rise in New Zealand's probably twice as fast as they had predicted. So that's a little bit concerning for people, especially that live on the coast. So global impacts, I won't talk about that because they're so huge and so far reaching. I think the more relevant ones for us will be, drought in some areas, flooding, increased storm, increased rainfall. Another one that some people don't often associate is actually ocean acidification. So our oceans absorb about 1/4 of our CO2. But the problem with that is when that gas goes into the ocean, it actually turns into an acid, which means the shellfish, the kai moana, their shells start dissolving. So that's going to have a whopping impact on fisheries, on harvesting, collection. There's so many things that we still maybe don't even understand what the extent of those impacts will be. But I hate to be doom and gloom, but they're not looking good. So carry on. So the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change is a massive, it's a United Nations body. They look at something like 35,000 research scientific papers. There's 64,000 reviewers. It's huge. It's the most comprehensive body that operates in terms of climate change and assessing impacts. And their last report was really alarming. They pretty much said, we've got a very, very narrow window and it's closing fast. We have to act now. They're saying it's a threat to human well-being and planetary health. Any further delay will miss a brief and rapidly closing window of opportunity. So, it's not just about us, it's about, biodiversity, which is it's a twin crisis. Biodiversity is not great. We've got 1 million species that are threatened with extinction. So moving on, what's happening? So this is starting to look a little bit better. What on earth are we doing? The New Zealand government said that they would cut emissions by 50% by 2030 and go carbon neutral by 2050. This is a very ambitious commitment, and they're starting to put things in place now to enact that, such as the Emissions Reduction Plan, Climate Change Adaptation Act, Carbon Neutral Program, and on and on and on. So there's a huge raft of plans and policies and strategies that are being rolled out. Some of them are mandated, and there is an expectation that a number of sectors will have to step up, and start reporting, start setting targets, and actually taking action. Because it's no use having a plan saying, oh yes, we're committed to climate change, and it just sits on your shelf and you don't do anything about it. So it's actually incredibly important that it's tangible, that it's enabled, that things are happening. And it's not just coming from government. I really strongly believe that grassroots sector, community sector has huge sway and huge impact. If you think of the plastic bag, I use that as an analogy. The Colmar Brunton poll maybe 6 or 7 years ago asked New Zealanders what was your biggest concern, and it wasn't poverty and it wasn't crime. It was a plastic bag was number one, which was really quite astounding, and that drove, because that was a grassroots public initiative, that drove the government then to ban plastic bags. So it's like top down, bottom up, the meeting in the middle, and something happens. So I think it takes both sides, all sides, to actually make those changes, collective action. So that's pretty much what I wanted to say. It's really quick because I haven't got a lot of time. I'd be happy to do a longer session if people were interested. I would set that up. So that sort of sets the scene. It gives you the science and the understanding of what's happening and how urgent it is. And I've talked about, grassroots, community groups doing things and collaborating and having collective action, which is super important. and we're not so bound, I suppose, by policies and plans and election cycles. I think we're a little bit more nimble. So I'm going to do I hand over to Jo now? Is that right? So I'm going to hand over to Jo, and she's going to give you the solution, one of the solutions anyway. So I'll stop sharing and I'll hand that screen over. Thank you.
Kia ora tātou, ko Jo Wrigley aho. I lead the team at Go Eco. Thanks, Rachel. I think solution is a very like a big thing to live up to, and I'm not sure that I can promise you all of the solutions today. But what I am going to talk to you a little bit about is our journey in this space, as well as an organisation and not-for-profit sector, as well as some events we have coming up to help and to help you develop your own plans, because far be it from us to tell you what to do. So here at Go Eco, it may come as a surprise to you, we're a regional environment centre, you should know that. But the surprise thing was we didn't have a sustainability plan, and we didn't have a plan for climate response. So over the last couple of years, we've been working on that, and across our team, and we worked with Rachel to develop the start of our response. And while we've been quite intense and naturally curious about different aspects of it, because it's our jam and what we do and live and breathe, it has come out of that there is such a huge opportunity organisationally to look at this in different ways, both health and safety, well-being and resilience, and organisational logistics have been our sort of direct experiences from working in this space. So some of you may be registered for the climate response pilot. And I think as of today, we've got 9 places left up for grabs. The climate response pilot is being funded by Trust Waikato, Waikato Regional Council, Waikato District Council, and Hamilton City Council, and is a collaboration of advisors from Parakori, Whaingaroa Environment Centre, Extreme Zero, The Basket, Ecos, Below Zero, and PIPA, Eco PIPA. So, so you see, we've got a range of advisors available to work with organisations, and we've got the region covered from Whaingaroa to Thames and Coromandel. And we're keen to work with as many organisations as we can in that space. If you want some more information about that, we're looking for small organisations, Māori organisations in the not-for-profit charity sector, community groups, and all with less than 25 FTE. We need you to be able to commit staff champion to upskill and provide information, and to attend 2 to 3 workshop sessions and be willing to share your stories from that. This is a pilot, so it's almost like a research program, because this will help build how organisations are supported as we move forward. It's a bespoke plan. The advisor that you work with will be working directly with you to develop a plan that suits your organisation. We're not taking a one-size-fits-all approach to this, and we understand from our own experience as a community organisation that every organisation has its own culture, its own operations, its own whakapapa, and its own way of actually just waking up and breathing every day as an organisation. So this is designed to support that. What we hope the outcome will be is that through education and through some facilitated support, that organisations have a plan that is integrated in their day-to-day, that you understand how to take the data from the energy bill from the fuel bill, these calculations of your emissions and how you just do that as part of your bookkeeping and your operations and what that means in your measurements. For us, it's been a hell of a journey to understand where our emissions are and how we contribute to those, and to put that in front of every team member and have every part of our team look at it and say, this is what we could do differently, after we've all gone, oh, that's a lot. But without the information, we couldn't do that. We were vaguely aware that we could do better, but not aware how much better we could do. It's a really engaging way of getting the team involved, and you know, we run our own competitions and that, but having it as part of health and safety, having it part of rostering and coordination, having it as part of our day-to-day logistics means that it's always front and centre, because it's about relationships and people for an organisation, we believe. So coming up, we have a couple of opportunities. One, you can register via the GoEco website for the Climate Response Program. It's free to organisations that fit that criteria, and we'll help you develop a plan over the next few months as part of the pilot. The other is we have what's it called? I keep getting the name of it wrong. Collaborative Emissions Reduction Workshop coming up at the Atrium, the 11th of October. It's for community organisations. We're going to have some guest speakers and we're going to have some fun, and we're going to give you some ideas. We're going to present some of our research as an organisation. So GoEco undertook a program of research with the staff around behaviour change for modes of transport. As an organisation, we have a range of vehicles, and we were looking at how we push back against the pressure to have organisational vehicles. So very clearly, for food rescue and redistribution, we can't do that on a bike. But we need to have vehicles. So this isn't about not having vehicles, but identifying why we have vehicles and what their purpose is as part of the organisational process. So at this workshop, it's all day, guest speakers, we're going to work with you around transport and actually drill down with you into what the transport requirements of your organisation are, what could change, what might have to change, what you could perceivably change, your model of service delivery and the barriers to your transport choices that are from that as well. So it's a facilitated conversation in a space with people working in the same space to see if we can come up with some collaborative goals around that. Not only not organisation goals, but as a community, what are the resources and solutions that are out there for us, and what would it take to move to those? For people going to the Community Waikato conference next week, Simon and I are going to do a quick little workshop around that. As a taster, and we'll present the first part of our research and data from that space. Do you want to add to that?
It's I guess there's been one of the points for us was that we you know, in terms of transport, we didn't actually know how our staff were actually getting to GoEco. We couldn't actually say, you know, this many people are traveling by bike and so forth. So we did this exercise to actually try and get a feel and a map for what people were actually doing. And actually we found that you know, going through that process initiated a process of change as well, which was interesting. So yeah, but look, we can fill you in more on that on the day. But it's yeah, a good little process to do, just a little bit of mapping there to see how staff are actually moving and how they're getting around and what they're using to get around. So yeah, so yeah.
So we'll be advertising the workshop on the 11th shortly, and we will have 3 very big questions for you to answer on the day, and hopefully the outcome at the end of the day is a little bit of radical hope around climate action and resilience for organisations, and how we can make it achievable. Because, you know, the first thing that I understand for community organisations is that we have funders and we have grants and we have expectations upon us that in some ways can create barriers for change within our organisations. So I'm looking forward to that conversation, and really genuinely hope that we can find some ways for this to be a practicable series of workshops and information for community organisations. Kia ora, everybody.
Can I just add one more thing? Thank you, Jo. We have 1 week left before registrations close for taking part in the climate response program. We only have 9 spaces left. We can take a total of 30 organisations. So I would encourage you to apply. If you go to the Go Eco website, to click on and apply there if you're interested. We'd love to have you take part. Kia ora.
Oh, and kia ora, shout out to Nako, who is on the Harris Piki, who is one of the advisory group from Parakori as well. Kia ora, Nako.
Beautiful. Thank you for that, Jo and Rachel. And we can send out some details on that as part of a follow-up email as well for both the workshop and the program. And I've just made Simon host so that he can share his screen, hopefully, and do his presentation from Toitu.
Kia ora koutou, everyone. I'm ko Simon Takuingoa. Ke Toitu and Wairakira ho e mahi ana. I'm Simon Anderson. I'm from Toitu and Wairakira. I work here as a product manager, and at Toitu and Wairakira we develop programs for assessing, verifying, certifying, reducing and offsetting carbon emissions. And one of the products that we've developed, and one of the things that I'm kind of quite involved with, is a product called Toitu Carbon Assess, which is our kind of product for small businesses, small organisations, starting out on that kind of carbon assessment kind of journey. So what I'm going to do today at probably a great deal of pace, hopefully everyone else has kept to time. I don't want to be the person who doesn't, but just take you through going the process of registering for the tool and doing a first assessment, all in 10 minutes. So wish me luck, and I'll kind of let that into that now. I can't seem to share at the moment, so maybe I'm not a host. Is that it's saying host disabled participant screen sharing.
Oh, I might have, Simon and Jo, I may have accidentally made you the host instead of Simon Anderson. Sorry, 1 second.
Too many Simons.
Couple Simons. Yeah, wrong Simon. Here we go. I'll reclaim and give it to the right one. Apologies. And there we go.
Great. Oh, perfect. I can see that now. I'm just going to share my screen. Tell me when everyone can see it. Has that come through now? Brilliant. Oh, someone's arrived. I'll just admit them as well. Great. So this is the kind of landing page for Toitū Carbon Assess. Now, assessing your carbon emissions, probably sounds quite frightening if you haven't done it, but Carbon Assess kind of designed to be a kind of a first entry into that, and to be a kind of a simple and friendly tool to use. So there's a little bit of information about the tool and who we work with, and maybe some of our other products. And when you're ready to join, you just click join now. And within there, there's a little bit about the tool, and click sign me up. So enter our name, and we'll say we're from Simon's Trust. Contact email address. Now just bear with me on that. I will just get one. Just bear with me. Just need to get the right email address. And enter a password. And type it correctly. So that you've read the terms and conditions, and click next, and get your password right, and enter your organization's name. The industry that you're in, and how many years you've been, it says business here, but in operation. And once you've entered that, you're all set up and ready to go. Once you're in here, what the assessment works across, kind of 5 kind of key areas where emissions tend to be around fuel, electricity, travel, freight, and waste. Most of this data is kind of readily available. If you run your organization's books and pay its bills, then you're more than likely to have this information at hand. Now, the first thing to enter is the reporting year. We really suggest that you align it to your kind of financial year. So if you run from the first, from April through to the end of March, then we suggest you do that. And we suggest as well you enter the year for, that you've just recently most completed as your kind of first year, your base year, because the main reason for that is you'll have all the data at hand, so you can finish your first report and generate it. So we'll say 21, and we'll click getting started. Now, the first thing that you tend to have to enter is your gross revenue. And, for not-for-profit organizations, this would be your funding, so it doesn't have to be financial revenue for the organization. It could be the amounts that you've funded or fundraised. And we'll say it's a Dr. Evil figure of $1 million, and continue with that. Now, then we're on to entering electricity, and electricity has to be entered at kilowatt hours, and you'll find this on your electricity statements. They'll say how many kilowatt hours. You can enter these individually or for all the year if you have a total. If you're kind of in a a situation where you don't have that information, like it's you're sharing a space, just work out with whoever is paying the bills, what's a fair allocation of the kilowatt hours out to you, just for clarity around that. Now, then it's on into fuel, and fuel is where a lot of the carbon is. It comes in lots of different formats, most often around petrol. Ideally capture it and enter it in litres, but if you've just got a dollar spend, that's okay here as well. And we'll say that there's 11,000. That's the total for the year. Again, you can enter these on month by month basis, maybe from a fuel card or from receipts. But yeah, there's also other types of fuel, say coal as an example, and say you've got a boiler for your building, that can be added in as well. So capture all that in there, but fuel is the kind of important one, often with the most carbon in there. Another important one is travel. And within there's kind of two areas that we're really interested in where most of the carbon exists, and that's around accommodation when you're traveling somewhere. So you enter the number of nights you're away. And this is only entered if you're staying in a hotel or Airbnb or something like that. If you're staying with friends or family and that, you don't tend to have to enter that there. And yeah, the other kind of key one around travel is air travel. Now, Toitu supply a travel calculator, and if you follow that link and enter your flights, it'll give you a kgs of CO2 equivalence number to enter in there. And I'll just put a number in here and note that this is flights for the year. So add that entry in there. We can see that's been added there, and on into the next one. Now, waste only starts becoming material if you have a contract for taking it away. So if you're putting out a rubbish bag, like once a week, it's not a material amount. So don't feel that you need to track it. But if you've got like a waste management contract where someone comes and takes a kind of skip away or a bin, then you want to start entering that data in there, and it can be entered in a couple of ways. Your provider hopefully should be able to help you with some of this information, but if they're not forthcoming with that, or then the help document, which is available down here, has some guidance for working that out. Now, the final thing to enter is freight. And again, if you're just sending a couple of parcels a year, it's not a big thing. But if you're starting to spend over $6,000 annually, it's starting to get material. So it's kind of good to put it in there. And that's done in tons per kilometres. Again, hopefully, if you're doing a lot of freight, your company will help you with that information. But if you're not too sure, again, there's some guidance down here in the help for working out a number around this. Okay, and I'll add that in, and I've got that in there, and I'll click done. And yeah, that's kind of got everything in here. You'll see this number in here, which is a total kgs of CO2 equivalents, which just means around all the emissions that are kind of built into this activity. If they were made into an equivalent of carbon, what that is. And if you've missed something, you just say, oh, I forgot a month worth of electricity. You just click on that and you can go and add that in at the bottom. And head back. But once you think, all right, I've got everything from the 1st of April 2021 in this case to the end of March, you can click publish. And it says, oh, you've done that successfully, which is good news, and you click OK. And it kind of makes a couple of changes to the data. It kind of moves it into a figure that says, all right, this is the amounts that you're spending. For every $1,000 of revenue, this is how many kilos you've produced. And the idea around this is, and we'll see it when I kind of generate the report, it just allows easier equivalence, easier comparison between year on year and kind of other organizations as well that are in the same sector as you. So Simon's Trust for this period, we've got this report here. When we created it, we thought, all right, what's something that's relatively straightforward you could put up on the wall in your reception, or we had this kind of romantic view of someone in a fish and chip shop has this up on the wall, and while the chips are cooking, they're explaining to their customers about how some of the changes they made since the previous year have lowered their emissions, so that's kind of a simple and straightforward report, and again within the help there's a lot of information for help you to explain that and to communicate that to your stakeholders. All right, so the last thing to quickly show here is if you want to share this data with stakeholders like Trust Waikato or the Climate Response Program, which we're kind of opening this up for, you can click on Share Data, and you'll be supplied with an account number for the organisation that you want to share it with, and you can click on that and share data with that. And we can see here, if we look down, we've shared it with Trust Waikato in this case. So that data is available with them. So that was a kind of a raving sprint through that. I roughly kept, I've gone a little bit over, sorry. Yeah, I'll be available for questions.
Beautiful, well done, Simon. And yeah, I guess the key to that is really the sharing feature is what we really love about Toitū. And we're also just very, very pleased that the tool is free, which is a fantastic initiative from Toitū. So without further ado, because we're running a little bit short on time for questions, happy to take any. If you want to take yourself off mute and ask away, or put them in the chat if you feel more comfortable doing it that way. Happy for all of us to answer questions. Yes, Diane.
Thank you, Simon. Hey, I'm really interested that your carbon calculator, you haven't allowed for any offsets in there, like tree planting and things like that. And we're an organisation that probably plants somewhere between 5,000 and 10,000 trees per annum. Is there any ability to bring that through into that calculation, or is there another part of the message that I'm missing?
No, no, you pretty much observed correctly. We didn't, within the tool as it stands, we didn't include an area for calculating offsets. Like you can, and say in some instances, like if you have a say zero carbon electricity account, say with Ecotricity or a company like that, you could put, it in at zero within there, but what we thought was probably more useful at the starting out point was that you saw all your emissions, and if you've gone like and purchased some offsets or done some work around lowering those emissions, you could show that side by side with it. So we really wanted to emphasize the what the carbon was and what the year-on-year reductions were, maybe more than the offsets. And also, often there's quite a broad view that people have around what an offset can be. So we really wanted to maybe just allow people to show that separately.
Do you also have any, provide any benchmarks of what's considered good, or do you just benchmark against yourself each year?
Yeah, look, it's kind of tricky around, and especially for small organizations, because you can grow really quickly and you can drop back quite quickly. So we thought total kgs of CO2 equivalents wasn't particularly useful. So we wanted to show it relative to funding so that you could compare against yourself. So, if I'd done a second year's assessment in there and generated a report, it will show the difference, the changes within the tool year on year. And we have a sector comparison within the report, but it does require over 10 organizations who have coded to the same industry before the kind of comparison kicks in at that kind of sector level or industry level, rather than the overall one. So yeah, I suppose the key one year on year is the organization's own reductions. And look, and an example of that could be if you buy an EV, maybe your electricity would go up a little bit. but your fuel would come down in the report, and you'd be able to point that out when talking to stakeholders.
Diane, I'll just pipe in a moment. I guess the pilot that we did, whilst our community groups are all in a sense different sectors and what they do, we're all not for profit and for purpose. And so the pilot and the idea of collating the information together gives us maybe a Waikato specific view, but that way you can see how your organization would be in comparison to some others. And that was some of the idea around coming together.
I just wanted to add about the trees. It's very difficult to standardize the offsetting because obviously trees grow at different rates, and it can take 20 years for a tree to mature to actually sequester the CO2. So people are cautious about saying, if I plant 100 trees, it's going to offset this amount, because they don't know the size of the tree. Is it native? Is it an exotic? And also, there's a really, really good calculator on Tane's Tree Trust. I don't know if you've seen that, but you can put in the number of trees you want to plant, how big they are bushes, are they shrubs, and it actually calculates the CO2 emissions for you. So I think as informal reporting, it's really good to do that. But in terms of standardizing it scientifically, they can't accept that unless it goes through the emissions trading scheme and you're offsetting through another means. But obviously in our situation, that's not relevant for us.
So just one last question too, Simon. With regards to you saying just calculate it off your grant income, why are we not doing it off our entire income? For us, all our income's sort of grant, but I'm just wondering why the differentiation.
Oh, no, or basically any revenue you come in. I just wanted to emphasize there around, it talks within the guidance for the tool a lot around, it's a very business centric. It's a bit business centric in talking about, like revenue. But I just wanted to say, look, from maybe for a not-for-profit, a grant would be seen as revenue in that case. So look, any income you're bringing into the organization, please include that as a total.
Awesome. Thanks, Diane. Thanks, Simon. Any other questions that have come up for anyone else? Feel free to take yourself off mute. Susan, did you have a query?
No, I don't. We're very, very small, and we actually don't have any vehicles. The only one would be electricity, that for our energy, and it's again a small amount.
Cool. And any other queries from anyone else? Feel free to pop them in chat or take yourself off mute.
Hilda, I would like to say that while a lot of this has been around the emissions calculations and how that part of this occurs, the program that we're operating is a climate response program rather than an emissions response program, and emissions form one part of the planning that we're doing. Just to be clear, the outcomes that we're seeking in the reports are two quantitative and one qualitative, and those and so that it's a broad spectrum, because from organization to organization you may have a leaning towards Western science, you may have a leaning towards Mātauranga, but how we bring those knowledges together for you as an organization operationally is sort of the broader sense of this this work.
And just following on that, before we do some closing comments, I guess, whilst any organization's emissions may not be that great, that collective actions around coming together with thinking about it, and people come from different backgrounds, just as Joe said, and that your knowledge and expertise in your area could really benefit the group as a whole. And so it's about coming together as a collective for our sector, and everyone has a part to play in that, and their own knowledge and expertise too. So I'll just leave it to Lily to close then, and thank you all for joining us.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you all for joining us today. We really appreciate it. And special thanks to Simon, Rachel and Joe for joining us. I've really enjoyed listening to the chat. So we'll send out an email after this with a few details about what was talked about today. So we'll send through some details of the workshop that's planned on the October the 11th. We'll send out a recording of this if you want to go back over anything. I'm not sure if Danny's PowerPoint worked for everyone, but there are a few slides there that were a bit zoomed in for me. So we'll send that out as well, so you can have a look at those slides. And the Trust Waikato account number, for if you do decide to sign up to Toitu, then you can share your information with us if you'd like. I think when we did this meeting last time in March, Toitu was a paid tool, and now it's a free tool, which I'm really excited about. And hopefully that might lower some barriers for some groups if you'd like to use it. So that's enough from me. I'll keep it short and sweet, but I'll just end us with a karakia, and then you can go enjoy the rest of your day. Kia tau, kia tātou katoa, te atawhai o tātou ariki, o ihu karaiti, me te aroha o te atua, me te whiwhinga tahitanga, ki te wairua tapu, ake, amine. Everyone, enjoy the rest of your Thursday. And thank you for joining.